Grand Arena of Zyra 9 was one of the largest combat coliseums in the galaxy, an enormous structure built from reinforced obsidian and carved deep into the heart of the mountainous planet. It could hold 100,000 spectators, and on this day, every seat was filled. The Intergalactic Combat Tournament was about to begin, an event revered across the cosmos. The greatest warriors of various species had come to prove their strength, vying for glory, honor, and in some cases, sheer survival. High above the arena, holographic displays flickered to life, showcasing the profiles of the competitors. Towering insectoids with chitinous armor, reptilian behemoths with jagged fangs, cyborgs whose mechanical limbs were designed solely for destruction. Each participant was a living weapon in their own right. Among them stood Threx, the reigning champion. Threx was a Zyran, a species notorious for their brute strength and battle instincts. He stood at nearly 8 feet tall, his muscular frame covered in dark blue scales that gleamed under the arena's artificial lighting. His eyes, like molten silver, scanned the crowd with practiced indifference. He had fought in over 200 battles, never tasting defeat. His species prided themselves on combat prowess, and as far as he was concerned, there was no race in the galaxy that could match a Zyran in battle. As the announcer's voice echoed through the Colosseum, listing the names of competitors, a murmur of laughter spread through the stands. The source of their amusement stood near the edge of the preparation area. A lone human. Lieutenant Adrian Cole, the first and only human ever to step foot in the tournament, adjusted his gloves and glanced around. He had expected the reaction. Humanity was relatively new to the galactic stage, and despite their technological advancements, they were often dismissed as physically weak compared to the war-hardened races that dominated the combat circuits. Threx's gaze landed on Adrian, and a smirk formed on his reptilian lips. The human was shorter than nearly every other competitor, his frame lean but unimposing compared to the monstrous warriors surrounding him. His armor was minimal, designed for mobility rather than brute force. To Threx, the sight was laughable. "You must be lost, primate," Threx said, his voice deep and laced with amusement. "This is not a training ground for fragile creatures." A few warriors nearby chuckled, their voices blending into the hum of the massive crowd. Adrian, unfazed, looked up at the Zyran with a calm expression. "I suppose we'll find out," he replied evenly. Threx's grin widened. He enjoyed crushing arrogance, and the human's confidence, however misplaced, was amusing. The Zyran turned to address the crowd, raising his arms as he played into their energy. "This tournament is meant for warriors," he boomed, "not weaklings who break at the slightest force. What do you say, my friends? Shall I demonstrate what happens when a lesser species oversteps its bounds?" The arena erupted into cheers and jeers, the audience fully expecting Adrian to back down. Threx relished the attention. He had made a spectacle of many before, and today would be no different. A tournament official, a neutral Aelthar judge with elongated, translucent limbs, floated toward them, holding a holopad that flickered with combat registration data. "Is this an official challenge?" the official asked, its glowing blue eyes shifting between Threx and Adrian. Threx grinned. "I think the human has already accepted, unless he plans to run." Adrian met the Zyran's gaze steadily. "I accept." The judge processed the confirmation, and the challenge was instantly displayed on the massive holographic screens above the arena. The crowd roared in approval, eager to see the inevitable bloodshed. The odds of the fight were instantly calculated, and betting stations lit up across the Colosseum. Threx was the overwhelming favorite, with Adrian's odds sitting at a laughable margin. "Combatants will face each other in the second match of the tournament," the judge declared. "Prepare accordingly." Threx leaned closer to Adrian, his voice dropping into a low growl. "I'll try to make it quick, primate." Adrian didn't flinch. Instead, he gave the faintest smirk. "We'll see." As the competitors dispersed to prepare for their respective matches, Adrian walked toward the private resting chambers allocated to fighters. The chamber's metallic walls hummed with a faint energy, a sign of the automated health scanners monitoring each competitor. He sat on the provided bench, his fingers absently adjusting the straps of his combat gloves. Outside, the arena continued to buzz with anticipation. Some of the other competitors watched Adrian with curiosity. Others ignored him entirely, convinced that his presence was little more than a novelty, an anomaly that would be erased within minutes of combat. Yet, deep in the observation stands, where high-ranking officials of various galactic factions sat, a few individuals watched the human with interest. They had heard stories, whispers of humanity's ability to adapt, to endure, to survive against impossible odds. The Galactic Council had underestimated them before. Perhaps they were about to do so again. Adrian exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. He knew how this worked. He had spent years in military service, training in conditions designed to break men far stronger than him. He had seen combat firsthand, fought in battles where strength meant nothing if one lacked intelligence, strategy, and adaptability. This tournament wasn't just about brute force. It was about survival. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was surviving. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, then opened them with renewed focus. In a few hours, he would step into that arena, and Threx, along with the rest of the galaxy, would learn a valuable lesson. Underestimating a human was a mistake they wouldn't live to make twice. The underground corridors of the grand arena buzzed with anticipation as combatants prepared for their matches. The air was thick with the scent of metal, sweat, and the faint hum of energy fields regulating the various chambers. Inside his private quarters, Adrian Cole stood before a reinforced mirror, securing the final strap of his combat gear. The synthetic material hugged his body, offering minimal protection compared to the plated armor most warriors wore, but he had never relied on armor to win fights. He had learned long ago that speed and precision outweighed sheer bulk. The tournament officials had announced the match schedule, and he had drawn the second fight of the day. It was a prime position, ensuring maximum audience engagement. But it also meant he had little time to gauge the competition before stepping into the arena. He wasn't concerned. His opponent was Threx, and that was all that mattered. Adrian stretched his arms, rolling his shoulders, focusing his breathing. He had faced stronger, faster, and more ruthless opponents before. Threx would be no different. A sharp chime signaled the call to the staging area. He exhaled, turned on his heel, and exited the chamber. The staging area was an open corridor leading directly to the arena gates. A towering archway framed the entrance, casting long shadows over the stone pathway. Warriors waited in the wings, watching as the first match played out on the massive holographic screens embedded in the walls. Roars and shrieks echoed from the Colosseum, punctuated by the sickening crunch of bones. Adrian barely glanced at the screen. He knew the brutality of these fights. He didn't need to see more. A familiar presence loomed nearby. Threx stood with his arms crossed, exuding an aura of pure confidence. Zyron's expression was one of amusement, as though he had already decided the outcome of their match. "Still here, Primate?" Threx asked, his silver eyes gleaming. "There's no shame in backing out now. Better to walk away than be carried out in pieces." Adrian smirked. "You talk too much." Threx chuckled, shaking his head. "I'll enjoy breaking you." A sudden burst of noise from the arena signaled the end of the first match. The victor, a hulking, armored reptilian warrior, roared in triumph as medics dragged his unconscious opponent off the battlefield. An amplified voice boomed across the Colosseum. "Next match, Lieutenant Adrian Cole of Earth versus Threx of the Zyron Dominion." The crowd erupted in a mix of laughter, cheers, and jeers. Threx's grin widened. Time to entertain the masses. The gates groaned as they slid open, revealing the battlefield beyond. The arena floor was a vast expanse of packed earth, lined with jagged stone formations and remnants of past battles. The scent of scorched sand and dried blood hung in the air. Towering above, thousands of spectators leaned forward, eager to witness what they believed would be a one-sided slaughter. Adrian stepped onto the field, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. Threx walked beside him, exuding arrogance with every step. The announcer's voice echoed through the Colosseum. A historic match. The first human competitor in the intergalactic combat tournament faces our reigning champion. Will this be the quickest fight in tournament history, or will the primate surprise us all? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Threx turned to face Adrian, flexing his clawed hands. Try not to die too quickly. I like to savor my victories. Adrian rolled his neck. Start the match. The referee, a mechanical construct floating above the battlefield, signaled the countdown. Combatants ready? Threx lowered into a fighting stance, his muscles coiling with anticipation. Begin. The moment the command was given, Threx lunged forward with inhuman speed, claws flashing through the air in a deadly arc. He aimed for Adrian's throat, intending to end the fight in a single motion. But Adrian wasn't there. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, fluid and effortless, as Threx's claws sliced through empty space. A split-slack opening, Adrian pivoted, his fist striking the exposed nerve cluster beneath Threx's arm. The impact was precise, targeted. Not powerful enough to injure, but enough to disrupt the Zyron's momentum. Threx snarled, jerking away, his expression flickering with brief surprise. The human had moved faster than expected. Luck, Threx muttered. Adrian remained silent, his stance loose, his breathing steady. Threx came again, this time more calculated. His strikes were relentless. Razor-sharp claws aimed for vital points, his movements refined through decades of combat. He had fought hundreds of warriors. None had survived his full assault. Yet Adrian evaded each blow with eerie efficiency. He didn't block, didn't counter, just moved, ducking, weaving, stepping just out of reach, reading every attack before it landed. Frustration crept into Threx's expression. The crowd, once roaring with laughter, grew quieter. The Zyron wasn't landing a single hit. Threx growled, feinting left before twisting into a brutal kick meant to crush Adrian's ribs. This time, Adrian reacted. He caught the motion an instant before impact, shifted his weight, and redirected the force. Threx's leg barely missed its mark, throwing him slightly off balance. Adrian struck, a controlled blow to the exposed joint at Threx's knee. The Zyron staggered. A murmur spread through the audience. Threx recovered quickly, fury burning in his silver eyes. You... Adrian moved first. He closed the distance in a flash, driving his palm into Threx's chest. The impact was small, insignificant compared to the raw strength of a Zyron. But Adrian wasn't relying on strength. He was testing. The shift in Threx's balance, the way his muscles tensed, the subtle hitch in his breath. It was all data, information he could use. Threx roared, launching himself forward with a powerful swipe, his claws tearing through Adrian's sleeve, grazing skin. A thin line of red appeared on the human's arm. First blood. The crowd cheered. Adrian exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance. The Zyron was strong, fast, and relentless. But he was also predictable. And that would be his downfall. Threx bared his fangs. Not so quick now, are you? Adrian smiled faintly. You still talk too much. Threx lunged again, but this time Adrian didn't evade completely. He stepped into the attack, and the tide of battle shifted. Threx's claws slashed through the air, a blur of lethal precision. His instincts screamed that the human should have backed away, evaded, as he had done throughout the fight. Instead, Adrian stepped into the attack. The moment of impact was strange. Threx had expected to feel his claws sink deep, to hear bones crack, to smell the sharp tang of spilled blood. But Adrian was already shifting, angling his body so that the strike barely grazed his ribs. A shallow wound, nothing more. Then Adrian moved. The shift in balance was microscopic, just enough to guide Threx's momentum off-center. The Zyrene's own strength betrayed him. The force of his strike carried him forward, just as Adrian twisted, locking his opponent's extended arm under his own. A surge of pain erupted in Threx's shoulder as Adrian wrenched his limb downward, using the Zyrene's weight against him. The movement was too fast, too efficient, too precise. Before Threx could react, Adrian drove his knee into the inside of his opponent's thigh. A sharp, targeted blow aimed at the dense bundle of nerves just above the knee joint. Threx's leg buckled. The crowd gasped. Adrian disengaged before Threx could retaliate, stepping back smoothly. His face betrayed no emotion, but his posture was different now. He no longer moved like prey. Threx bared his fangs, his breath heavy. His leg burned from the strike, but the pain barely registered over the boiling rage in his chest. This was not how it was supposed to go. A human, a weak, flesh-bound creature, was standing toe-to-toe with a Zyrene gladiator. Unacceptable. Threx roared and surged forward. His movements were faster now, more aggressive, fueled by anger. He launched a brutal combination of swipes and kicks, forcing Adrian onto the defensive. The human still dodged, but now there was something else. He was watching, calculating. Threx felt it. Adrian wasn't just avoiding his attacks. He was studying them. The realization unsettled him. His kind had fought for centuries, honing their combat techniques through battle and bloodshed. They were warriors by birth, by instinct. The human had no right to adapt this quickly. Adrian shifted again, a subtle adjustment in footwork, a tilt of his torso. A split second later, Threx struck with his full weight, aiming for the human's torso. Adrian countered with a sidestep so fluid it seemed effortless. Then, in the same breath, he delivered a single, perfectly placed palm strike to the side of Threx's head, just beneath the ridged plate of bone protecting his skull. The impact sent a sharp shock through the Zyrene's nervous system. Not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to disrupt his equilibrium. For the first time, Threx stumbled. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Adrian still hadn't tried to overpower him. Every strike was precise, intentional, designed to wear him down without direct confrontation. The Zyrene realized, too late, what was happening. The human was dismantling him, piece by piece. Threx's breath came harder now. His body was strong, his endurance unmatched, but something was different. He felt slower. Every strike cost him more energy than it should have. Adrian had done nothing but move, deflect, and counter, yet the battle was shifting. The truth settled like a stone in Threx's gut. The human wasn't fighting him. He was breaking him down. Adrian's stance shifted again. His eyes locked onto his opponent's every twitch, every breath. He had seen this before. Overconfidence leading to sloppiness. Strength becoming a weakness. Threx attacked again, lunging with an open swipe meant to end the fight, but Adrian saw it coming before it even started. He ducked, closing the gap in the space of a heartbeat. His fist slammed into Threx's exposed side, right between the ribs where the Zyrene's natural armor was weakest. Pain flared through Thrax's body. Then another strike, this time to the same knee Adrian had targeted earlier. The already weakened joint screamed in protest. Threx staggered. The arena was deathly silent. Adrian stepped back, rolling his shoulders as if testing his own flexibility. He wasn't even breathing heavily. Threx glared at him, his fangs bared. His pride burned worse than his injuries. "You—" He clenched his fists. "You're toying with me." Adrian tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "No, I'm beating you." The words hit harder than any punch. The silence from the crowd was suffocating. A Zyran warrior, an undefeated champion, was being systematically outmaneuvered by a human. Threx refused to accept it. He refused to believe that this battle was anything but an anomaly. He let out a guttural growl and braced himself. His muscles tensed, his claws curled, his rage rising like wildfire. Adrian exhaled softly. His eyes remained steady, focused. He had already won. Threx just didn't know it yet. Threx's body pulsed with raw fury. His breathing labored as he glared at Adrian. The human's face remained infuriatingly calm, his stance steady, his every movement deliberate. The Zyran knew battle, had lived for it, bled for it. He had fought warlords, executioners, creatures bred solely for combat. Yet, standing before him was a human, a species dismissed as weak. And for the first time in his long, undefeated career, he felt something alien creeping into his bones. Doubt. No, not doubt. Fear. The realization struck like a hammer. The crowd had noticed it too. Their raucous cheers had dulled, their once booming voices now murmurs of disbelief. The laughter was gone. The jeers had turned to hushed conversations. The illusion of Threx's invincibility was fracturing, and Adrian was the one chipping away at it, one precise strike at a time. Threx refused to accept it. His body ached from the countless micro-wounds Adrian had inflicted. Strikes too well placed to be coincidence. The human wasn't overpowering him, he was dissecting him. Calculating his every move, stripping away his advantages, reducing him to nothing but a lumbering beast lashing out blindly. The thought sent fresh anger surging through his veins. He would not allow it. Threx roared and charged, his feet pounding against the ground as he launched himself forward with everything he had. No more games, no more testing the human. He was done underestimating his opponent. He would end this now. Adrian didn't move. It was the first time in the entire fight that he remained still. Threx's claws shot forward, aimed straight for the human's chest. He wanted to feel flesh tear beneath his fingers, wanted to hear the satisfying crack of bones giving way. Then Adrian shifted. Not away, not to the side, forward. The human met the charge head-on, something no sane fighter would do against a Zyran. He ducked beneath the incoming strike at the last second, the air humming as Threx's claws sliced through empty space. Adrian twisted in close, inside the Zyran's reach, too close for Threx to effectively counter. A sharp, controlled impact drove into Threx's ribs. Not a wild punch, not a desperate strike. Just a single, perfectly placed blow to the exact spot Adrian had targeted earlier. The pain flared instantly, sharper than before. Then came another strike, and another. Adrian's hands were like blades, cutting through Threx's defenses with pinpoint accuracy. Each impact was measured, precise, hitting the same weakened points over and over, amplifying the pain, forcing Threx's body to betray him. His knee buckled again. His vision swam for a fraction of a second. Adrian didn't stop. A swift elbow to the temple sent a fresh wave of dizziness through Threx's skull. His body fought to stay upright, but Adrian had already moved, driving his palm into Threx's jaw with just enough force to snap his head back. The Zyran stumbled, the crowd gasped, the fear bloomed in full. Threx had never stumbled in a fight before, never lost control of his balance, never felt this sense of helplessness creeping into his limbs. He forced himself to steady his breathing, to push past the pain. But Adrian was already there. The human wasn't fighting for show. He wasn't fighting to prove a point. He was fighting to break Threx. The realization sent a shudder down Threx's spine. For the first time, he saw the truth. This wasn't luck. This wasn't some fluke. Adrian had planned every move, every counter, every moment of this battle from the instant it started. Threx had never faced an opponent like this before, and that terrified him. The silence in the Colosseum was deafening now. The spectators, once certain of Threx's victory, were gripping the edges of their seats. They weren't sure anymore. Neither was Threx. The Zyran warrior forced himself to stand tall, though his legs threatened to give out. His claws flexed, his body screamed in protest, but his pride refused to let him falter. He was a champion. Then Adrian did something that sent a chill down his spine. He smiled. It was a faint, almost imperceptible smirk, but Threx saw it. The human knew he had won. And he was letting Threx realize it too. Something inside Threx cracked. The rage, the confidence, the arrogance, it all crumbled beneath the weight of that smirk. The mighty Zyran warlord, the undefeated champion, had just been outclassed. Not by brute strength, not by superior weapons, by a human, a species he had dismissed, a species everyone had dismissed. He had thought humans were weak. He had been wrong. Threx's breath came in ragged gasps. His muscles burned, his joints ached, and his mind reeled from a truth he had never imagined possible. He, the undefeated champion of the intergalactic combat tournament, the warrior whose name was spoken with reverence and fear, was standing on unsteady legs. Across from him, Adrian stood unharmed, his breathing calm, his stance loose and composed. The fight was over. Threx could see it in the human's posture, in the faint glint in his eyes that spoke of absolute certainty. The Zyran had always been the predator, the hunter, the force that made lesser species tremble. But now, in this moment, he understood. He was the hunted. A cold, unfamiliar sensation curled in his gut. He had never feared an opponent before. The audience had gone silent. No cheers, no jeers, no mocking laughter. Just tense, breathless anticipation. The thousands who had come expecting a spectacle had received something else entirely. A lesson. Adrian took a step forward, slow and deliberate. Threx flinched before he could stop himself. His pride screamed at him, but his body betrayed the truth. His mind was no longer concerned with winning. It was searching for an escape. That was when it finally sank in. The fear he felt. It was the same fear he had seen in so many before. The same dread his victims had shown before he crushed them. The human had turned the battlefield against him, twisted his own strength into weakness, and made him question the very foundation of his existence. He wanted to deny it, but denial wouldn't save him now. Adrian stopped just outside his reach. His eyes never wavered, never flickered with arrogance or mockery. There was no pleasure in his gaze, no need to humiliate. That somehow made it worse. Threx clenched his fists. You should finish it. His voice was rough, strained, barely above a growl. Adrian studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. It's already finished. Threx's stomach twisted. The human didn't need to say it aloud, but he understood. Adrian had never been fighting for victory. He had been fighting to send a message. The realization sent a fresh wave of unease through Threx's chest. This was no accident. The human hadn't won by brute force. He hadn't won because of luck or desperation. He had won because he had planned every step of this battle before it had even begun. And that was what made him dangerous. Adrian stepped back and turned his head toward the floating referee droid. Call it. The droid hesitated, then its metallic voice echoed across the arena. Winner, Lieutenant Adrian Cole of Earth. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the murmurs began. Not cheers, not outrage, just hushed whispers, rippling outward, traveling through the ranks of spectators like an unstoppable force. The human had won. No, not just one. A human had dominated a Xeran warrior, had torn him apart without a single moment of panic or struggle, had exposed the flaws in his technique, had used his own strength against him, had reduced him to nothing but a stumbling fool in front of the entire galaxy. The implications were terrifying. This was not how things were supposed to be. The Galactic Council had always seen humans as an anomaly, a primitive species not yet worthy of recognition. They had strength, but so did countless others. They had technology, but it was crude compared to the empires that had existed for millennia. And yet, here was proof that the assumptions had been wrong. Adrian didn't stay to bask in the moment. He gave Threx one last glance before walking toward the exit, his pace unhurried. He had done what he came to do, but the damage had already been done. As he disappeared into the tunnels, the arena was still buzzing with whispers. Some warriors looked shaken, others enraged. Some eyed the spot where he had stood with something new in their expressions. Uncertainty. Fear. Threx remained standing in the center of the battlefield, his claws clenched at his sides, his mind a storm of thoughts. He could still feel the weight of Adrian's blows, the phantom echoes of strikes too precise to be anything but calculated. He had been broken, not by sheer force, but by something far more dangerous. Intelligence, adaptability, humanity. And the galaxy would never see them the same way again. Far above the arena, in the private viewing chambers, where the most powerful figures in the galaxy observed the tournament, the atmosphere was tense. A high-ranking official from the Galactic Council leaned forward, his expression unreadable. This was unexpected. A warlord from the Threx Dominion frowned, his claws tapping against the armrest. A fluke. An ambassador from the Vrax Syndicate shook his head slowly. No, not a fluke. This changes things. The room fell silent. It wasn't just about a single human winning a fight. It was about what it meant. If one human could do this, how many others were out there? The council members exchanged glances, each of them arriving at the same unspoken conclusion. Humanity had just sent a message to the entire galaxy, and it had been received.